Imagine witnessing a majestic wild stallion suddenly vanish beneath a cracking, frozen lake, trapped in icy waters, with no one around to save him. What happens next defies everything you thought possible. Winter in the Colorado wilderness is a season of extremes, a time when beauty and brutality intertwine in stark contrast. The sprawling landscape around Lake Everwood lay buried beneath a thick blanket of snow, its icy surface glistening under a pale sun, barely breaking through heavy slate-gray clouds. The cold was unforgiving, seeping into every crevice and threatening life itself. For the wild creatures who called this rugged terrain home, survival during these months was a constant battle against the elements' hunger and the unpredictable dangers lurking beneath the snow and ice. Amid this frozen wilderness moved Midnight, a black Mustang stallion whose presence commanded attention and respect. At 7 years old, he had long since established himself as the natural leader of a tight-knit herd. His sleek coat, dark as the night sky, was marked by a striking white blaze on his forehead, a symbol that made him instantly recognizable to the few who had glimpsed him in his untamed world. Midnight was a creature of power and grace, embodying the raw spirit of freedom that defined the American West's wild horses. Yet beneath his proud exterior, there was a palpable vulnerability, a reminder that even the strongest must bow to the merciless forces of nature. The winter of 2023 had been particularly harsh. A relentless storm had buried the region under record-breaking snowfall, turning the familiar landscapes into an unrecognizable expanse of white. Temperatures plunged to brutal lows, and the bitter wind carried a sting that cut through even the thickest fur. For Midnight and his herd, the world they knew was growing increasingly inhospitable. The grasses and shrubs they depended on were buried beneath feet of snow food sources, dwindling to nearly nothing. Hunger gnawed at them, driving them to take risks they might otherwise have avoided. On one fateful morning, just before dawn, Midnight led his herd through the snow-draped fields surrounding Lake Everwood. The air was still heavy with the silence that only a winter storm could bring. His keen eyes scanned the horizon, searching for signs of life, a patch of grass, a sheltered nook, anything that might sustain his family. But the landscape offered little hope. The herd followed closely, behind their breath forming clouds of vapor in the frigid air, their movements cautious and deliberate. As they approached the lake, Midnight made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. Rather than taking the safer, well-trodden path around the water's edge, he veered toward the frozen surface. The lake stretched out like a vast sheet of glass shimmering under the dawn's early light. But beneath its frozen beauty lurked hidden peril. Unseen underwater springs kept patches of the ice thin and dangerously unstable. It was a gamble, one born out of desperation and a fierce determination to provide for his herd. The other horses hesitated at the shoreline, their instincts warning them against the treacherous ice. Whisper, a mare known for her cautious nature and close bond with Midnight, stayed back watching nervously. But Midnight pressed on, each hoofall echoing softly against the brittle ice. His steps were careful and measured, yet with every moment the risk grew. Suddenly, a sharp, chilling crack shattered the quiet morning. The ice beneath Midnight fractured, and in an instant, he plunged through the surface into the icy depths below. The shock of freezing water enveloped him, and panic surged through his powerful limbs as he fought desperately to find solid ground. His cries, wild, desperate whinnies, echoed across the frozen expanse, a haunting sound that carried both fear and a primal will to survive. Watching from the tree line was Emma Carter, a wildlife photographer who had dedicated years to documenting the secretive lives of the Mustangs roaming this remote wilderness. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she captured the harrowing scene through her telephoto lens. She had never witnessed anything like this before, the raw, unfiltered struggle of a wild horse caught between life and death. Without hesitation, she reached for her phone and dialed 911, her voice steady but urgent as she relayed the emergency. The response was immediate. Officers Daniel Blake and Sarah Kim, along with their partners Jason Lee and Maria Torres, were dispatched to the scene. The Everwood Police Department was no stranger to emergencies, but this was unlike anything they had encountered. None were trained specifically for large animal rescues on frozen water, but the situation left no room for hesitation. With sirens wailing and lights flashing, the team sped toward the lake, each second ticking away like a drumbeat of impending tragedy. Arriving at the shoreline, the officers took in the grim sight before them. Midnight was trapped in a widening hole, his powerful legs thrashing against the ice as he struggled to pull himself free. The fractured ice groaned under the pressure, threatening to give way entirely. The Mustang herd stood clustered on the bank, their faces etched with worry, their breath rising in anxious clouds. The officers knew that waiting for specialized animal rescue teams was a luxury they could not afford. Those units were engaged hundreds of miles away in another crisis. The responsibility fell to them. They began to assess the scene, weighing risks and formulating a plan with the tools and experience they had. The cold was merciless and the dangers were all too real. The ice could collapse beneath them at any moment. The water below was a deadly trap, promising swift hypothermia. But beyond the physical hazards, there was something more profound at stake, a life wild and free, hanging by a fragile thread. Daniel and Sarah moved swiftly, calling on Jason and Maria to form a human chain designed to distribute their weight across the ice's brittle surface. Every movement was deliberate and cautious, each step calculated to minimize risk. A rescue rope was prepared, its loop fashioned into a lasso to snare Midnight without harming him. As the team inched across the ice, the tension was palpable. The air was filled with the sounds of cracking ice, the desperate calls of the herd, and the steady breaths of the rescuers. Emma documented the unfolding drama, her camera capturing moments of courage and vulnerability alike. Midnight's struggles slowed his energy, sapped by the freezing water and the relentless cold. But even as exhaustion threatened to claim him, his eyes held a fierce spark of determination. It was a fight not just for survival, but for the very essence of his wild existence. In those harrowing moments, a silent bond began to form, a connection between man and beast forged in the crucible of crisis. The officer's courage and resolve met Midnight's indomitable spirit, creating a shared will to overcome the odds. This was more than a rescue. It was a testament to the resilience of life and the unbreakable threads that can tie disparate worlds together, even in the harshest of winters. The bitter wind whipped across Lake Everwood as officers Daniel Blake, Sarah Kim, Jason Lee, and Maria Torres prepared themselves for a rescue that none of them had ever fully trained for. The frozen expanse stretched out before them, deceptively serene under the gray sky, yet hiding deadly threats beneath its fragile surface. The ice groaned under their weight, a stark reminder of the danger they faced as they moved cautiously toward Midnight, the trapped Mustang struggling desperately in the icy water. Each officer was acutely aware of the stakes, not just for Midnight, but for themselves. One misstep could mean disaster. The cold bit into their faces, their breaths freezing in the air, but they pushed forward with grim determination. The team formed a human chain, lying flat and distributing their weight to avoid breaking the brittle ice beneath them. Their movements were slow, calculated, every muscle tense as they edged closer to the widening hole where Midnight fought for his life. From the shore, Midnight's herd watched in anxious silence, the tension almost tangible. The whinnies and snorts that usually echoed across the landscape were muted, replaced by the chilling stillness of dread. Whisper, the mare closest to Midnight, pawed the frozen ground, her eyes wide with worry and helplessness. It was a raw, painful moment, wild and human worlds converging in desperate hope. Officer Sarah Kim's hands trembled as she prepared the rescue lasso. Her childhood on a nearby ranch had taught her the art of roping, but this was different. This was a wild horse she had never touched before, a creature driven by instinct and fear, and every throw carried the weight of life and death. Her first attempt fell short, the rope slipping harmlessly into the frigid water. A tight silence fell over the group. Then, with a deep breath, Sarah swung the rope again. This time, the loop landed perfectly around Midnight's neck. "Got him," she whispered, the words barely audible over the crackling ice and the pounding of her own heart. Now came the most dangerous phase. Pulling a 1,000-pound animal out of icy water was no easy feat. Too much force risked choking the horse or snapping the fragile ice further. Too little would fail to bring him to safety. Officer Daniel Blake called out instructions, his voice steady despite the chaos. "On my count, 1, 2, 3, pull onshore." A line of volunteers and local residents gripped the rescue ropes, their faces etched with determination. The collective effort began a slow, grueling tug against the cold and the weight of the trapped stallion. For a long moment, Midnight remained still, weighed down by exhaustion and the freezing water clinging to his muscles. But then, with a sudden burst of raw power, he kicked out with his hind legs, his front hooves finding the fractured edge of the ice. "He's helping," Maria Torres shouted, hope breaking through the tension. The team leaned into their effort, pulling with everything they had. The ice moaned ominously beneath them, threatening to give way, but no one faltered. Inch by agonizing inch, Midnight's body moved closer to solid ground. His powerful eyes met Sarah's again, and in them she saw not fear, but a strange understanding, as if Midnight recognized the life-saving intent behind the human hands reaching for him. Minutes felt like hours. The frozen world around them was silent except for the strained voices of the rescuers and the low whinnies of the herd, which seemed to carry a desperate plea across the air. Finally, with one final heave, Midnight was pulled clear of the water and onto the ice. The crowd on shore erupted in a breathless cheer, but the officers knew the ordeal was not over. Midnight lay on the ice, shivering violently, unable to rise. His once majestic black coat was soaked and plastered to his trembling frame, his breath coming in ragged clouds. The ice beneath him was thin and cracked, threatening to break at any moment. It was a race against time to get him to safety. With meticulous care, the officers and volunteers worked together to slide Midnight toward the shore, the fragile ice groaning under the strain. Every movement was a delicate balance between urgency and caution. They kept talking to him softly, their voices a balm against the cold and fear that must have gripped the wild stallion. As they neared solid ground, Dr. Melissa Hart arrived, her presence a beacon of hope. Her expertise was crucial for what came next, the battle against hypothermia and trauma. She immediately began preparing emergency medical supplies and warming equipment. In those first moments of rescue, a remarkable thing happened. Despite the trauma and exhaustion, Midnight's dark eyes remained calm and focused. He seemed to look directly at each officer, almost as if silently acknowledging the hands that had risked so much to save him. It was an unexpected connection, a glimpse of something beyond instinct, an awareness that transcended species and circumstance. This bond, born in the crucible of danger, would become the foundation for everything that followed. As the team worked to stabilize Midnight, the officers shared quiet moments of reflection. Jason Lee, a veteran of many emergencies, admitted he had never imagined such a rescue could be possible. Maria Torres, often the quietest of the group, found herself deeply moved by the stallion's strength and trust. The rescue at Lake Everwood was more than a daring operation. It was a profound testament to courage, resilience, and the unspoken ties that bind humans and animals. Together, they had challenged the deadly winter storm, the treacherous ice, and the relentless cold to bring a wild spirit back from the brink of death. And as Midnight's struggle slowly shifted toward hope, the officers knew that their work was far from finished. The rescue was only the beginning of a journey, one that would test their compassion, patience, and belief in the extraordinary connection between man and nature. For now, though, there was a quiet triumph in the air, a fragile victory born from determination and an unyielding will to save a life that refused to be lost to the frozen lake. The rescue of Midnight from the icy grip of Lake Everwood marked only the beginning of a profound journey, a journey that would test the limits of healing trust and the fragile bridge between wildness and humanity. As the officers carefully transported the shivering stallion from the frozen shore to a makeshift emergency treatment area, the gravity of what lay ahead weighed heavily on everyone involved. Midnight was no longer just a wild Mustang fighting for survival. He was now a symbol of resilience, a living testament to courage on both sides of the rescue. Dr. Melissa Hart immediately took charge, her calm demeanor bringing a sense of order amidst the cold chaos. She wrapped Midnight in specialized thermal blankets designed for large animals, while portable heaters hummed softly nearby, casting a warm glow in the biting air. Every breath the stallion took was monitored with precision, every shiver noted as a battle against the insidious effects of hypothermia. The freezing water had drained much of his energy, his muscles stiff and slow to respond. Yet amidst the clinical urgency, there was something deeply remarkable unfolding. Midnight, despite the trauma he had endured and the strange presence of humans surrounding him, remained unusually calm. His dark eyes, often wild and wary in the past, now held an almost serene awareness, tracking the movements of the officers and Dr. Hart with quiet focus. It was as if in those moments of vulnerability, a silent understanding had been forged, a fragile trust, born not from captivity, but from shared survival. The officers, soaked and exhausted, took turns gently touching Midnight's sleek coat, their hands offering comfort without constraint. Sarah Kim whispered soothing words, her voice a balm against the chill and fear. Daniel Blake knelt beside the stallion's head, speaking softly as if to anchor him in a world suddenly unfamiliar, yet not hostile. Jason Lee and Maria Torres coordinated with Dr. Hart, adjusting IV lines and monitoring vital signs, all united by a common purpose. Days stretched into a week, and with each passing moment, Midnight's recovery became a story of quiet miracles. His temperature gradually rose, muscles regained strength, and his once dull eyes began to sparkle with the fire of life. But what fascinated Dr. Hart and the officers most was not just the physical healing, it was the evolving relationship between this wild stallion and the humans who had saved him. Unlike the typical wariness exhibited by wild Mustangs toward people, Midnight began to display signs of recognition and preference. When the officers came to visit, he would approach the fence, lowering his head to allow gentle strokes. He allowed brushing and soft touches, gestures that would have been unimaginable before the rescue. It was as though he remembered their faces, their voices, and in some profound way chose to accept them. Dr. Hart observed these interactions with both professional curiosity and heartfelt wonder. There is a measurable physiological response, she explained to the growing group of behavioral specialists and local ranchers who had come to assist. His heart rate stabilizes when these officers are near. His cortisol levels, stress hormones, drop. His recovery accelerates when he senses their presence. She described it as a bond that transcended instinct, an exceptional case where trust fostered healing in a wild animal. This revelation sparked a unique collaborative effort in the community. Local ranchers, inspired by Midnight's story, joined forces with the wildlife authorities and the Everwood Police Department to establish a monitored feeding station near the herd's territory. The station was designed to support the Mustangs through future harsh winters, providing supplemental hay and shelter while respecting the horses' natural behaviors and freedom. Meanwhile, the officers shared their own reflections. Sarah Kim confessed in quiet moments how this experience had reshaped her understanding of connection and responsibility. It's not just about saving a life, she said, it's about honoring it. Midnight taught me that wildness and trust aren't opposites. They can coexist if we're patient and compassionate. Daniel Blake nodded in agreement, adding, "We are all part of the same ecosystem. This rescue reminded me that courage and kindness can ripple far beyond the moments we see." For Midnight, the healing process was both physical and emotional. His days settled into a rhythm marked by gradual strength building and increasing interaction with the officers and caregivers. He ate well, drank warm water willingly, and began tentative movements within the enclosure set up for his recovery. His gait, once shaky and uncertain, grew steadier, though his body still bore the marks of the ordeal. Perhaps the most poignant moments were those when Midnight's wild instincts gently intertwined with the trust he was building. He remained alert to his surroundings, ears flicking towards sounds beyond the enclosure, eyes scanning for familiar scents of his herd. Yet he never recoiled from the humans nearby. Instead, he displayed a subtle grace, a quiet acceptance that was both beautiful and humbling. The officers, particularly Jason and Maria, took pride in their evolving relationship with Midnight. They spent off-duty hours visiting him, bringing carrots and speaking softly. These visits became a source of healing for both the horse and the humans, a testament to the power of empathy and mutual respect. Throughout this time, Emma Carter continued to document the journey, capturing moments that spoke volumes beyond words. Her photographs of Midnight resting beneath warm blankets, of the officers' gentle care, and of the horses' slowly brightening eyes circulated in the community and beyond, sparking conversations about wildlife conservation, human-animal bonds, and the responsibility borne by those who intervene in nature. The story of Midnight's recovery transcended a simple tale of survival. It became a narrative about hope, resilience, and the unexpected connections that can emerge even in the coldest, harshest conditions. It challenged preconceived notions about wildness and domestication, illustrating instead a complex dance where trust and respect forged a new path. For the Everwood community, Midnight's journey was a source of inspiration and unity. Ranchers, conservationists, officers, and residents found common ground in their shared care for the land and its creatures. Together, they began envisioning new ways to coexist with the wild horses, honoring their freedom while acknowledging the delicate balance required to protect them. As the winter slowly eased, the time approached to consider Midnight's future beyond the recovery enclosure. Yet despite his progress, the stallion's heart remained tethered to the humans who had saved him. This extraordinary connection would soon prompt questions and decisions that challenged long-standing wildlife management traditions, underscoring the profound impact that acts of courage and compassion can have not only on individual lives, but on the very way communities relate to the natural world. In this chapter of healing and connection, Midnight was no longer just a wild Mustang rescued from the ice. He had become a living bridge between two worlds, a symbol of what is possible when bravery meets empathy and when humans recognize the shared vulnerability and strength in all living beings. The moment had finally arrived, the day when Midnight, the once trapped stallion of Lake Everwood, would be released back into the wild that had shaped him. For the Everwood community, it was a bittersweet occasion, filled with hope, reverence, and a deep awareness of the extraordinary journey that had led to this point. Months of recovery, trust building, and healing had transformed Midnight, but the question lingered heavily: how would he respond to freedom after forging such a profound connection with the humans who had saved him? As dawn broke over the snow-covered meadow near the edge of Lake Everwood, the landscape was serene and cold, kissed by soft light filtering through the towering pines. The air held a crispness that seemed to echo the solemnity of the moment. Midnight stood quietly inside the trailer, his black coat shimmering with health, the white blaze across his forehead stark against the dark fur. His eyes, deep and knowing, reflected both the wild spirit within and the calm trust that had grown over the past weeks. Outside, officers Daniel Blake, Sarah Kim, Jason Lee, and Maria Torres stood in formation, their patrol vehicles lined up alongside wildlife management trucks, and a small gathering of ranchers, volunteers, and community members who had followed the stallion's story with unwavering support. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, a mingling of joy, relief, and the unspoken understanding of the delicate balance between freedom and connection. As the trailer doors opened, Midnight stepped out gracefully, pausing for a moment as his gaze swept across the faces before him. His herd was visible at the meadow's edge, the lead mare lifting her head and calling out with a clear, joyous whinny. Yet instead of racing toward the familiar call of his family, Midnight took deliberate steps toward the officers. One by one, he approached each man and woman who had risked their lives on the ice to pull him from near death. He stopped before Daniel, lowering his head slightly in what the witnesses would later describe as a gesture of profound acknowledgement. His dark eyes held an unspoken message, one that transcended words and bridged the gap between species. Midnight then moved to Sarah, who had cast the rescue lasso, pressing his forehead gently against her shoulder in a moment that brought tears to many eyes. Jason and Maria received the same solemn respect, each connection marked by a quiet dignity and a clear sense of gratitude. Emma Carter, standing nearby with her camera, whispered, "He's saying goodbye." Her words captured the hearts of those present, encapsulating the rare and beautiful bond forged in adversity and nurtured through patience and compassion. After these moments of intimate farewell, Midnight finally turned toward his waiting herd. With a powerful surge of renewed strength, he galloped across the snow-covered meadow, his powerful legs cutting through the crisp winter air. The herd welcomed him back with spirited whinnies and joyous prancing, a celebration of survival, resilience, and reunion. Yet Midnight's story was far from over. In the weeks and months that followed, the officers found themselves encountering the stallion and his band with increasing frequency during routine patrols around Lake Everwood. Unlike the wary distance maintained by other wild horses, Midnight often approached the patrol vehicles, his presence calm yet purposeful. He seemed to seek out the humans who had saved him, maintaining a respectful distance, but initiating contact in a way that defied conventional understanding of wild horse behavior. Dr. Melissa Hart and Dr. Ellen Reeves, the state's leading expert on wild horse behavior, meticulously documented this unprecedented phenomenon. They observed that Midnight existed in a new and delicate space, neither fully wild nor domesticated. He had created a unique protocol for interaction, honoring both his natural instincts and the extraordinary relationship he had formed with his human saviors. This bond sparked critical discussions among wildlife authorities, conservationists, and the police department about how to honor the wildness of the Mustangs while recognizing the meaningful connections forged through rescue and rehabilitation. The traditional protocols rooted in minimal human contact were challenged by Midnight's case, revealing the complexities and nuances of wildlife management in a changing world. After careful deliberation, a groundbreaking decision was made. Midnight would be released back to his home range, but with a significant modification to standard practice. A specialized feeding station would be established at the edge of his territory, serving as a monitored connection point where the stallion could be observed and provided with supplemental care during extreme weather conditions without disrupting the natural dynamics of the herd. The release ceremony became a symbol not only of Midnight's survival, but also of a new legacy, one where courage, empathy, and respect shaped the relationship between humans and wild animals. The community's involvement, from ranchers to law enforcement officers and wildlife experts, embodied a shared commitment to coexistence and stewardship. 1 year after the dramatic rescue, the Everwood Police Department held a formal ceremony to honor the bravery and dedication of officers Daniel Blake, Sarah Kim Jason Lee, and Maria Torres. The event drew media attention and a crowd of supporters, all eager to celebrate the heroes who had risked their lives for a creature many considered untouchable. As Daniel accepted the commendation, a murmur spread through the audience. There at the forest's edge stood Midnight himself, majestic and calm, with his band grazing peacefully behind him. The sight was profound, two worlds once separated by instinct and caution, now connected by a bridge built from shared trust and compassion. Midnight's presence was a living testament to the power of kindness and the potential for unexpected bonds that transcend boundaries. The story of Midnight continues to inspire those who hear it, a reminder that true bravery is not only in facing physical dangers, but in opening hearts to the possibility of connection with the wild. It speaks to the resilience of life, the depth of empathy, and the enduring hope that we can coexist with the natural world in ways that honor both freedom and friendship. In a landscape shaped by seasons of hardship and beauty, the legacy of Midnight and the officers who saved him stands as a beacon, a call to action for all who cherish the fragile balance of life, urging us to approach the wild, not with domination, but with reverence, courage, and an open heart. The story of Midnight, the black Mustang who was miraculously rescued from the icy depths of Lake Everwood, is far more than a tale of survival against the odds. It is a narrative woven with threads of courage, resilience, empathy, and the extraordinary power of connection between humans and the wild. Midnight's journey from a desperate fight for life beneath frozen water to a celebrated symbol of hope and unity serves as a profound reminder of the delicate balance that exists between nature and humanity, and the remarkable outcomes that arise when compassion and bravery meet. When the winter storm trapped Midnight on the treacherous ice, his fate seemed sealed by the cruel forces of nature. Yet it was the swift, selfless action of 4 police officers, Daniel Blake, Sarah Kim Jason Lee, and Maria Torres, who stepped into the unknown, without hesitation, willing to risk their own lives to save a creature that was at once wild and vulnerable. Their determination to act despite lacking specialized training for such a rescue demonstrated that heroism often comes not from expertise alone, but from heart instinct and an unwavering commitment to protect life. The rescue operation itself was a testament to teamwork, innovation, and trust. The human chain across the fragile ice, the precision of the rescue lasso, and the collective effort of volunteers on the shore illustrated the profound impact that collaboration and shared purpose can have, even in the face of danger. Yet the true marvel was Midnight's own will to survive and the unspoken understanding that blossomed between the officers and the stallion during those harrowing moments on the ice. Midnight's recovery further deepened this connection, challenging conventional boundaries between wildness and domestication. Under the expert care of Dr. Melissa Hart and through consistent, gentle interaction with his rescuers, Midnight began to exhibit behaviors that reflected not just healing of body, but also trust of spirit. This bond, rare and remarkable, highlighted how empathy and patience can foster profound relationships with animals, traditionally considered untouchable, a powerful lesson about the potential for connection across differences. As Midnight was prepared for release back into his natural habitat, the story took on new layers of meaning. His deliberate gestures of gratitude toward each officer, the hesitation to immediately rejoin his herd, and the continued interactions months later painted a portrait of a creature who had embraced both his wild nature and a unique kinship with humans. This duality challenged wildlife authorities to rethink traditional management protocols, recognizing that relationships born of care and respect could coexist with preservation of freedom and wildness. For the Everwood community, Midnight's journey became a catalyst for broader reflection on how humans relate to nature. Ranchers, conservationists, police officers, and citizens came together inspired to develop new strategies that honor the autonomy of wild animals while offering support in times of crisis. The establishment of a monitored feeding station and ongoing collaborations symbolized a commitment to stewardship grounded in humility and understanding. What then can we learn from Midnight's incredible story? First and foremost, it teaches us about the power of courage, not only the bravery to confront physical danger, but the willingness to act when circumstances call for it, even without certainty or specialized skills. It reminds us that compassion can drive us beyond fear and hesitation, opening pathways to healing and hope. Secondly, the story highlights the importance of trust and connection. Whether between humans or between species, trust is a fragile yet transformative force. Midnight's willingness to accept care and interact with his rescuers shows that trust can bridge divides, foster cooperation, and lead to mutual benefit. In a world often marked by division, this example calls us to seek understanding and empathy in our relationships with others. Thirdly, the narrative urges us to rethink boundaries between wild and tame, human and animal, self and other. Midnight's journey defies simple categories, illustrating that life is complex and that our responses to it must be nuanced. It encourages us to embrace complexity and uncertainty with openness and respect. So how can these lessons apply to our lives today? We can start by cultivating courage in the face of challenges, large or small, whether that means standing up for someone in need, pursuing a difficult goal, or simply choosing kindness when it is easier to ignore. We can practice building trust, listening deeply, and extending empathy beyond familiar circles. And we can remain open to the richness that comes from embracing difference and working toward harmony in diverse communities. Midnight's story also invites us to consider our role as stewards of the natural world. It challenges us to act responsibly and compassionately toward all living beings, recognizing that our choices impact ecosystems and lives beyond ourselves. Whether through supporting conservation efforts, reducing environmental harm, or fostering coexistence, each of us holds the power to make a difference. If this story touched your heart and inspired you, as it has inspired so many, we invite you to join our community. Subscribe to our channel to stay connected and support the creation of more stories that celebrate courage, resilience, and the extraordinary bonds between humans and nature. Your support fuels our passion and motivates us to continue sharing powerful narratives that uplift and enlighten. Together, we can honor the spirit of Midnight and countless others whose lives remind us that even in the coldest, darkest moments, hope endures, and with it, the promise of new beginnings. Thank you for being part of this journey. Stay inspired, stay compassionate, and stay connected.